Sidra Bibi was only 16 years old when a pillow was pressed against her face until her breathing ceased forever. The decision didn't come from an unknown criminal, but from a council of elders who considered her death necessary for the unforgivable crime of wanting to choose her own husband. What's most terrifying about this story isn't just its brutality, but the fact that 405 young women like Sidra suffered the same fate in 2024 alone in Pakistan. And you're about to discover that this number may be just the tip of the iceberg of a much darker reality. Before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this video? I always read them. To completely understand Sidra Bibi's murder, you need to know about 3 secrets that her family had been keeping for decades. The first involves a dark family tradition that no one dared to question, a tradition that went far beyond what anyone in the community imagined. The second is related to something Sidra discovered about her own past just weeks before dying, a truth so devastating that it completely changed her worldview. And the third, well, that one will show you how she tried to escape from a destiny that had been sealed long before she was born. Sidra had grown up in a small village in Punjab province, Pakistan, where women were considered property, not people. From a young age, she showed signs of independence that deeply disturbed her family. While other girls lowered their heads and accepted their fate, Sidra asked questions. She asked why she couldn't study like her brothers. She asked why she needed to cover herself completely when leaving the house. She asked why her opinion didn't matter in family decisions. But there was something different about Sidra, something her family had tried to suppress since her childhood, a rebelliousness that came from a source she didn't even completely understand. Her eyes had a flame that her aunts and cousins didn't possess. She questioned traditions that other women accepted without blinking, and that, for a family like hers, was more dangerous than any external threat. The house where Sidra grew up was in a rural region where the elders' word was absolute law. There was no effective police, no government protection, nowhere to run when family traditions became death sentences. It was a place where women disappeared, and their families simply said they had found their destiny. Sidra's family was no stranger to honor crimes. When investigators began digging deeper after her death, they discovered a disturbing pattern that extended across 3 generations. Her paternal grandmother, Rashida Bibi, had disappeared mysteriously in 1982 at age 23. Official records said she had died of illness, but neighbors whispered a different story. She had tried to flee with a man from a different caste. A paternal aunt, Nazreen, had died in a domestic accident in 1994 at age 28. Officially, she had fallen downstairs and broken her neck. Unofficially, she had been seen talking to a lawyer in the neighboring town 3 days before her death. Neighbors said she was questioning the family's practices and threatening to expose old secrets. But most disturbing of all was that in both cases, the deaths were followed by a period of mourning in which the family received visits from important men in the region. Men who arrived in expensive cars and spoke in whispers with the family patriarch. After these visits, the family's financial situation always mysteriously improved. There's a pattern to these deaths that was only discovered when investigators dug deeper into the family's history. Her pattern that explains why the reaction to Sidra's decision was so extreme and calculated, because these deaths weren't just about family honor, they were about something much more sinister and profitable. The local community had learned not to ask questions about the women who disappeared from the Bibi family. It was a subject no one touched, a wound no one dared to probe. But Sidra, unaware of her family's dark history, was about to become the next victim of a tradition that masked much more complex crimes. When Sidra announced, on a March morning in 2024, that she wanted to marry Ahmad, a young teacher from the neighboring town, her family's reaction was instantaneous. But it wasn't anger. It was something much worse. It was relief, as if they finally had the justification they had been waiting for years. Her father, Muhammad Bibi, didn't shout. He didn't hit her. He simply nodded and said, "Now I understand why you were always different." Her mother, who until then had tried to protect her from the family's stricter traditions, suddenly changed her behavior. She began treating her with a coldness that Sidra had never experienced. It was as if she had ceased to be her daughter at that exact moment. It was as if, somehow, her decision had confirmed suspicions the family had been carrying for a long time. Because, you see, there's something about Ahmad, the groom Sidra chose, that made her decision not just unacceptable, but dangerous to the entire power structure of the community. Ahmad wasn't just a teacher, he was an investigative journalist in his spare time. He was working on a series of reports about unsolved crimes in the region, specifically focusing on women who had disappeared over the decades. And most terrible of all, Ahmad had begun his investigation precisely with the Bibi family cases. He had documents, interviews with old neighbors, questionable medical records. He knew things that could destroy not just the family's reputation, but expose a much larger network of corruption and crime. Something I can only reveal to you after you understand how the Council of Elders really operated in the region, and why Sidra's death was just a small piece in a much darker and more dangerous game. 3 weeks before her death, on a rainy April afternoon, Sidra was helping her mother clean the family house's attic when she found a rusty metal box hidden behind old beams. Inside the box were documents that would change her life forever, and, ironically, lead her to death. There were birth certificates, old photographs, and handwritten letters, but what shocked her most was finding her own adoption certificate, dated 1996, when she was only 2 years old. According to the documents, her biological parents were Fatima Ahmad and Karim Ahmad. The surname wasn't a coincidence. Ahmad was her biological father, not just her future husband's surname. The letters revealed an even more devastating story. Fatima Ahmad had been an investigative journalist who was researching honor crimes in the region during the 1990s. Her letters, addressed to colleagues in Karachi, detailed her discoveries about a network of families who used traditions as a smokescreen to eliminate inconvenient women. She had discovered that many of the so-called honor crimes were actually murders for economic interest or to silence witnesses. Fatima's last letter was dated 3 days before her official death in a car accident. In it she wrote, "I've discovered something that goes beyond honor crimes. There's a human trafficking network operating through these families. Women aren't just being killed, some are being sold. If something happens to me, take care of my daughter Sidra. I've left evidence hidden where only she can find it when she grows up." What Sidra discovered in these documents completely changed her perception of why she had always felt different from the other women in the family. She wasn't rebellious by nature. She had inherited her biological mother's investigative gene, but it also sealed her fate, because this discovery made her make a decision that her adoptive family considered the last straw. She decided to confront the family about her true identity, and in this confrontation, she revealed that she knew about the suspicious deaths of other women in the family. Worse still, she mentioned that her fiancé Ahmad was investigating exactly the same cases that her biological mother had researched 28 years before. The Council of Elders who decided Sidra's fate weren't just respected men from the local community. Later investigations revealed that they operated a clandestine network that went far beyond traditional honor crimes. This network controlled marriages, properties, local elections, and even trafficking routes through fear, violence, and manipulation of religious traditions. The council leader, Haji Mahmoud, 67 years old, was officially a respected grain merchant. Unofficially, he controlled a network that extended across 3 Pakistani provinces. Young women who dishonored their families weren't just killed. Some were sold to prostitution networks in Karachi and Lahore. Families received compensation for their loss, and everyone kept silent about the young women's true fate. Sidra had inadvertently discovered how this network functioned, and her chosen fiancé was exactly the wrong person, someone who could expose decades of corruption, human trafficking and murders disguised as tradition. Ahmad wasn't just investigating old crimes, he had infiltrated the network and collected enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. But there's something even more shocking about this network that was only discovered after the council members' arrest. They had international connections. Pakistani women weren't sold only domestically, some were sent to Persian Gulf countries, where they worked as domestic or sexual slaves. It was a multi-million-dollar operation disguised as religious tradition. What happened in this council's final meeting, when they decided Sidra's fate, will show you how far they were willing to go to keep their secrets. Because the decision to kill her wasn't made for family honor, it was a cold and calculated business decision. In her last 15 days of life, Sidra wasn't just planning a wedding, she was planning an elaborate and desperate escape. Using a cell phone she had secretly bought, she had contacted the International Organization for Human Rights in Islamabad and was preparing documents to leave the country with Ahmad. But Sidra had discovered that she wasn't the first woman in the family to try to escape. Among the documents she found in the attic were letters from her grandmother Rashida, written in the months before her disappearance in 1982. Rashida had planned to flee to India with a man from a rival family. She had even obtained false documents and money for the trip. Rashida's letters revealed disturbing details about her last weeks. She wrote about being followed, about whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room, about the growing feeling that her time was running out. In the last letter, dated 2 days before her disappearance, she wrote, "I know they know. I know I won't be able to escape. But maybe if I hide these letters, someone in the future will understand what really happened to the women in this family." Sidra also found evidence that her aunt Nasreen had tried a different approach. Instead of fleeing, she had tried to expose the family to authorities. Documents showed she had contacted provincial police and was preparing detailed testimony about the family's crimes. But 3 days before her scheduled deposition, she fell down the stairs and died instantly. Armed with this historical knowledge, Sidra developed a more sophisticated plan than her predecessors. She and Ahmad had decided not just to escape, but to expose the entire criminal network simultaneously. They had a contact in the international press, copied documents, and a plan to reveal everything once they were safe. But what they didn't know was that the very human rights organization Sidra had contacted was infiltrated by network informants. Their every move was being monitored, every plan was being reported directly to the Council of Elders. On the night of May 2, 2024, exactly 18 hours before her death, Sidra made a 47-minute call to an international number. Investigators were able to trace this call after her death, and what they discovered completely changed the case investigation. The call was made to London, England, to a number registered under Sarah Ahmad's name, Ahmad's older sister, who had emigrated to the United Kingdom 5 years earlier. But Sarah Ahmad wasn't just an ordinary emigrant. She worked for an international organization combating human trafficking and had direct connections with Interpol. During that 47-minute call, Sidra wasn't just asking for help. She was passing detailed information about the human trafficking network operated through honor crimes. Partial recordings of this conversation, recovered by Pakistani intelligence, revealed that Sidra had discovered something much bigger than isolated family crimes. She had found evidence that the network operated on an international scale, with connections in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and even the United Kingdom. Because Sidra wasn't just fleeing an arranged marriage, she was fleeing something much bigger, something involving millions in dirty money, political influence reaching Islamabad, and a crime network that had operated for generations. And Sarah Ahmad, on the other side of that call in London, had information that could destroy powerful families not just in Pakistan, but in several countries. Most shocking of all was that Sidra had discovered that some of the women who supposedly had been killed for honor crimes were still alive, working as slaves in distant countries. She had names, locations, and even photographs. It was enough information to bring down the entire operation and free dozens of women. But this call was intercepted, and the person on the other side of that call was about to become the network's next target, even being thousands of miles away. The family tradition I mentioned at the beginning was actually a systematic elimination system for women who discovered the secrets of a decades-old criminal operation. Sidra's family weren't just extreme conservatives. They were part of an international criminal network that used honor crimes as a smokescreen for murders of interest and to silence inconvenient witnesses. Each dishonored woman in the family had in fact discovered something about the family's illegal business. Rashida, the grandmother, had discovered that women in the community were being sold instead of killed. Nasreen, the aunt, had collected evidence about the network's corrupt political connections, and Sidra was just the latest in a long line of executions disguised as religious tradition. During interrogations after the arrests, council members revealed shocking details about how the operation worked. Families identified problematic women, those who asked questions, who showed independence, who discovered secrets. These women were then watched until they did something that could be interpreted as dishonor. Once dishonor was established, the council would meet to decide the woman's fate. Younger, more attractive women were frequently disappeared and sold. Older women, or those who knew too much, were executed. Families received financial compensation in both cases, ensuring their cooperation and silence. The money came from various sources: sale of women, blackmail of local politicians who used the network's services, and even donations from international criminal organizations that needed safe routes through Pakistan. It was an empire built on the suffering of vulnerable women, protected by distorted traditions and fed by systemic corruption. Seized documents revealed that the network had processed more than 200 women over 30 years. Sidra was just another name on a macabre list of profits and losses, treated as merchandise in a business spreadsheet. The documents Sidra found in the attic revealed an even more devastating truth about her identity. She wasn't just an adopted daughter. She was the daughter of Fatima Ahmad, an investigative journalist who had been murdered by the same network that was now planning to kill Sidra. The Bibi family hadn't adopted her out of kindness. They had taken her to ensure that her biological mother's secrets remained buried. Fatima Ahmad had been one of the most brilliant journalists of her generation, graduated from the University of Karachi and specialized in human rights issues. Her investigations had begun to expose the connection between honor crimes and human trafficking when she was permanently silenced. But before dying, she had hidden crucial evidence that Sidra was destined to find when she grew up. Sidra's escape plan was more advanced than anyone imagined. She and Ahmad weren't just trying to escape. They had collected enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. They had photographs of documents, conversation recordings, financial records, and even testimonies from some women who had managed to escape the network. But their escape attempt failed because the international organization she contacted was infiltrated. The person who was supposed to help her was actually a network informant, paid to identify and neutralize threats to the operation. The 47-minute call to London wasn't just intercepted, it was deliberately facilitated to discover exactly what Sidra knew and who else was involved. Sarah Ahmad, in London, represented an international threat to the network. She had connections with Interpol and was working to expose human trafficking networks operating between Asia and Europe. Sidra's call revealed not just the extent of operations in Pakistan, but also provided crucial links that Sarah needed to connect similar cases in the United Kingdom. That's why Sidra was killed not for dishonor, but for knowing too much and having the right connections to expose an international criminal operation. Her death was a business execution disguised as an honor crime, ordered by men who saw women as merchandise and traditions as tools of control. Sidra Bibi's story reveals a terrifying truth about how honor crimes can mask international criminal networks. She died not for wanting to marry for love, but for discovering truths that could destroy a human trafficking operation that generated millions of dollars annually. Her case exposes how sacred traditions can be distorted and used as weapons to silence inconvenient voices and protect criminal interests. The Council of Elders who killed her weren't guardians of morality. They were executives of a criminal corporation that treated women as disposable products. The pillow that suffocated Sidra was guided not by family honor, but by greed and fear that decades of crimes would be exposed to the world. Today, thanks to the evidence Sidra managed to pass to Sarah Ahmad in that final 47-minute call, international investigations are dismantling similar networks in several countries. Her death, although tragic, ended up exposing exactly what she had dedicated her last weeks of life to investigating. But while Sidra's family believed they had buried their secrets along with her, on the other side of the world in London, a young British Muslim woman was about to discover that not even 3,000 kilometers of distance and the protection of British laws would protect her from the deadly obsession of a family willing to cross continents to restore their tainted honor. A story that will show you how these criminal networks operate on a global scale, transforming honor crimes into international executions.